Hi, I like watching computers getting built. There's something ASMR about it for me. I haven't built one for myself for a while, so I decided to change that. I had a few parts, I ran to Micro Center to get a few more parts, and now it's time to build a new one. The build's going to consist primarily of the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D. I have a RTX 4070 Super already, and I wanted to try out this new power supply, this Lian power supply that has this funky little hub on it. So we'll see what all that's about. And I decided to go with the Corsair Frame 4000 case. It's pretty new. I've seen a couple of reviews on it. It looks okay. I built in prior Corsair cases, the 4000D, the 5000D, and even the 7000D. So I wanted to check that out and see how it differs. I'll put the parts list down in the description. All right, first impressions on the case. It looks pretty clean. I like white cases because they're a lot easier to see inside of. It has the 3 standard fans up front here. The power and the RGB are all daisy chained to each other. The GPU bracket slides up and down and tightens down. This front panel to the basement comes off. The top panel comes off, obviously. And this pops out as well. On the back side, the lighting isn't the best back here, but on the back side, all your prerequisite cables for the front connectors, including the daisy chain termination of the RGB and the fans. Looks okay. One minor thing that I did notice, which I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that at the moment with this build, is the card I'm using is going to be this white RTX 4070 Super, but how can I get a good view of this? But you can tell it's not long enough to actually reach the mounting bracket. I'm not sure how I can accommodate that. I might have to find a different mounting solution. One thing on this case is the ability to rotate the backplate to do vertical mount on the GPU. Of course, you need a riser cable for that, but I don't know if that's the way I'm going to go with it. Taking a closer look at the motherboard, the GigaByte Aorus X870E Pro Ice. We have debug codes, we have power and reset buttons, your prerequisite connectors that you would expect to see. I do see an HDMI on the side. They say it's for control panel readouts, but I'm not sure if that means the CPU itself has to support that. It likely does. We got various SATA, USB power or fans, RGB, audio. We have one panel back here, 3 NVMEs. There's one here with another NVMe. Let's see what we got on the back. Good healthy number of USBs, USB-C, it says USB 4 display port, there's 2 of those, and Wi-Fi, audio, 2.5 gig, Ethernet, and HDMI, which probably also is going to require a CPU that supports that. So let's put it together. right, it's time to power it up. Let's turn the power supply on and push the power button. And hopefully, if I put everything together properly, it should boot up. And cross your fingers. Let's see what happens here. Overall, the case is pretty good. There's a couple of interesting things that I wasn't really happy about. The cable management on the back is good. There's a lot of space inside. The all-in-one, though, I tried to put the all-in-one up at the top, and the hoses were interfering with the default fans on the front. I couldn't put the hoses off of the back side because that would turn into a really weird curly loop and twist up the cables too much. It was too tight. I decided to put the exhaust fans up at the top and put the radiator fans in a push configuration against the radiator. But in doing so, the way it's mounted, I don't have screws long enough to go from the mounting bracket through the fans into the radiator. So I had to do short screws on the fan side against the radiator and then short screws on the mounting bracket into the fans. Seems to work okay. It gives me a little bit of clearance, which I'll show in a minute. And that's one of the downsides to this case with a 360 radiator. 240 would have been fine, but live and learn. Now you know. Also, the fans themselves, these are the RS120 fans, I believe, from Corsair. They're daisy chained. So we have one set of daisy chained power going to the front and the top fans. I have two separate runs going into that little hub off of the Lian Li power supply. There's that little hub on there. So that will at least give me two channels and half the current going through, so I'm not overwhelming one channel or hooking a whole set of 3 or 6 of them daisy chained into the motherboard. The RGB is also daisy chained. I have one sequence of RGB going end to end and then into the header on the motherboard. We'll see how that works out with the RGB. The challenge with RGB here is going to be the control of it. This isn't using Corsair iLink or IQ, I mean. It's just going off the motherboard headers. I have to figure out how I'm going to configure the RGB because we have the RGB for the pump, we have the RGB for the fans, and I might put a couple of LED strips in. I have one more RGB header. We'll see how I can wire that in. But there's also RGB on the Asus RTX, what do we got? 4070 Super. The challenge with that is now I'm going to have to use motherboard software to get the RGB off the motherboard and the fans and the pump, and then NVIDIA software to get the RGB off of the card. But I'm going to try to experiment with some of the open signal, I think it's open signal or open RGB, or some of the third-party RGB controls and see how that works. The fan controls hook, all 3 fans are hooked into one header, fan header, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to control that very well, so I need to see how the software is going to deal with that, or the motherboard itself, and how it's going to monitor speed and regulate the speed. And finally, the last thing I want to do is I got to load the operating system. I'm going to load the OS before I stick in the second SSD, NVMe, and that way it'll be a little bit more portable. Anybody who's tried to install on multiple drives, sometimes it splits across drives. I don't want any of that. I'm not going to do any of that. And finally, what else? Yep. So I think that'll do it. And I'm going to Once the operating system's loaded and it's benchmarked, I need to benchmark it and check on the thermals and do the tweaks and adjustments. If you want to see me doing that or see the results of that, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to put up a little video with you know, various benchmarks, etc. So now I call this one built, and here's the peel. It's pretty tight. And all right. And there we go. So thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.